In terms of size, it's your pretty standard mid-tower case that matches up pretty well with offerings from the competition. The main chassis is made from a combination of steel and plastic materials, and it feels really strong and sturdy and just overall well made. It's got a nice full view tempered glass side panel with a new easy slide on and off mounting system that relies on a set of clips and a pair of thumb screws at the back. One major advantage of this system is that it keeps your fingertips off the glass when you're handling the side panel. So unlike most cases where everything just gets covered in fingerprints because the thumb screws are actually sitting right up against the face of the glass, you don't have that here. So in comparison, and from my own personal experience, this is a much more clean and low maintenance design. So good job Corsair on that one. The front panel attaches to the case using the same type of clips used on the side, but without the thumb screws, and it's made of metal and it actually feels pretty strong and it's got some weight to it. Up front, we've got an easy to remove dust filter and only one pre-installed 120mm fan. It's just a plain black fan, there's no RGB or any lighting options or anything like that, and of course you can add more of these or swap them out for something entirely different if you want to, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. The I/O panel sits up top, just behind the front bezel, and it includes a reset button, headphone and mic jack, USB 3.1 Type-C port, USB Type-A port, and the power button. The top has a really standard and basic magnetic cover that also functions as a dust filter. The steel grate beneath matches the pattern used in the front panel and also on the top of the power supply shroud, and that helps keep a nice, clean, and consistent look throughout the case. Around back, we've got the I/O shield cut out for the motherboard, a pre-installed 120mm fan, 7 PCIe expansion slots with 2 additional slots oriented vertically. We've got the power supply mounting plate and a small removable dust filter. And underneath there's some feet to raise the case up a bit for airflow, and they've got some rubber pads on them for grip and to help reduce vibration. On the inside, we've got room for ATX motherboards right out of the box in the stock configuration, but it can also accommodate eATX motherboards if you're willing to slide the cable pass-through channel forward to free up a little bit of extra space. Maximum GPU length is 360mm and CPU coolers will fit in here up to 170mm high. In the front, there's room for 3 120mm or 2 140mm fans or radiators up to 360mm. Up top, you can mount 2 120s or 140s or radiators up to 280mm. And at the back, there's only room for a single 120mm fan. The entire bottom's covered by a continuous power supply shroud, and it's got a few cutouts on it to pass your cables through to help with routing and to get everything connected, and it's also ventilated to help dissipate any heat that might get trapped below. Behind the motherboard tray, there's 2 removable mounts for 2.5-inch drives, and they're tool-free and just attached with some thumb screws, so they're really easy to use. There's also a small drive cage at the bottom that can fit 2 3.5-inch drives using a pair of plastic trays, and these get the job done, but I prefer the way Be Quiet handles drive mounts in their cases. It just feels so much more robust and strong and durable compared to these plastic things. Power supplies will fit down here up to 220mm in length, but depending on which size you're using, you might have to slide the drive cage forward or remove it altogether to free up enough space. And if you do need to slide it all the way forward, just keep in mind that it looks like it's going to create a conflict with the installation of 360mm radiators in the front location of the case. So if you've got a big power supply and you got to slide that drive cage all the way forward, then 360mm rads might be out of the question for your build. There's various tie-down points and a plastic channel to help with routing and organizing your cables, and cables can be tightened down into the channel with some included Velcro straps. And there's also some cutouts and pass-through points to get your power and data cables through to the other side. I really liked building and installing hardware in the 4000D. It was just a fun case to work with. And I mean, it's got its tight spots, but so does any case in this particular class. Like, these are small mid-tower cases. So when you look at cases from the competition, it's around the same size. So that type of thing's to be expected. So if you're building a gigantic video editing system and you've got, multiple graphics cards and tons of drives, then this form factor really isn't for you anyway, and you should be looking at bigger cases. The tightest space to work with was underneath the power supply shroud. I used a 180mm length power supply, and in order to get that to fit with enough room for all the cables that need to attach, it did require me to take the drive cage and slide it all the way forward. So like I said before, that means 360mm radiators are out of the question for this particular system setup. So if you know you got a 360mm radiator, make sure you double check the length of your power supply. If it's too long, it's probably going to be a problem, unless you can take the drive cage right out if you're not using any 3.5-inch drives. Other than that, the build went well. Cable management's pretty easy despite the fact that it's a small case. There's lots of tie down points. I used some zip ties to secure some of the cables in the back, and that channel, even though it's pretty small and not very deep, is good enough to route some basic basic cables. So I think this is a great computer case for anybody that doesn't have a ton of cables in their system. Like I said before, if you've got lots of drives, multiple graphics cards and stuff, you're probably going to need a bigger case, not just to fit that hardware, but also to manage all those cables and connections and stuff like that. Now, one thing that I'm really not happy with is that this airflow focus case only comes with 2 pre-installed fans, and they're just little 120s. They give you one in the front for an intake and then another little 120 back here as an exhaust. I mean, if it's an airflow focused case, can't they at least make the 2 fans 140s? Like, come on, Corsair. But having said all that, for the performance testing, I ran it in its stock configuration with just the 2 pre-installed fans, and then I ran it again, but with 2 140s in the front, a 140 in the top exhausting, and then I kept this little 120 in the back because there's no room for a 140. And hopefully that upgraded fan configuration will give you an idea of what this case is really capable of if you were to upgrade your fans. With only the 2 pre-installed fans, idle temps on an air-cooled Core i9 9900K and GTX 1080 Ti were actually looking pretty good. But under 100% load, the CPU hit 84C, which I think is pretty hot considering there's no overclock. Sound levels were on the quiet side, sitting around 25 decibels at idle and maxing out at 42 at 100% fan speed. Now with the 3 140s installed, idle temps dropped just a few degrees, nothing too exciting here, but at full load there was a pretty big difference in the temps, with the CPU maxing out around 78C down from 84. And as expected, adding more fans increased the noise levels to 33 and 47 decibels respectively. Overall, there's a lot to like with the 4000D airflow. First of all, I think this one here looks amazing with the all white and gray color scheme and then the little pops of yellow accent color. It looks great and it really stands out in the sea of white and black cases that are so popular out there. But if this one's not really your thing, Corsair does make a version in black as well, so you can always go that route. And then there's the other things where Corsair just really paid attention to detail when they designed this case. There's lots of cable management, routing options and stuff like that that really helps keep your build looking nice and clean. And then there's that touch-free glass side panel that should keep your glass clean and maintenance-free pretty much, unless you're touching it for some other reason. This is an airflow focused case, and in my opinion, Corsair compromised the airflow in its stock configuration. They probably did that to keep costs down, so if you really want to take advantage of this case, you're going to have to spend a little bit more money and deck it out with some better fans or more of the ones that come with it.